everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James. I'm here in Chicago where the weather is beautiful, unlike a lot of places in the country. And we are recording this on the 19th of July for the week of July 22nd. We have two really wonderful guests today. We're going to have an Irish blues woman named Grainne Dufffy. Then we're going to have Michael Deutsch of the People's Law Office, filling us in on all kind of legal matters that relate to our well-being here in the city and beyond. I wanted to let you all know that I think next week on our show, we're going to have the blues man, Charlie Musselwhite. So stay tuned, okay? So wherever you are and wherever you're going, we're glad you're tuned in to Live from the Heartland, whether you're getting it on YouTube, whether you're getting it on CAN TV, on Spotify or Google Podcasts, or the broadcasts on Saturday and Wednesday on Chicago's very own WLUW Loyola University station. This is number 162 since the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm going to share a little bit of news with you or information before we meet up with our first guest. Most of the people who listen or watch the show know very well that the Supreme Court has been ruling in a very conservative way, and they last week got rid of affirmative action in college admissions. And I would like to report that Wesleyan University in Connecticut has joined other selective universities and college in dropping legacy admissions. That would include Amherst, Johns Hopkins, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and let's hope that many other schools follow with that. On the labor front, I get an email every day from Payday Report covering labor in news deserts. And today they reported that 3,300 UPS pilots are set to go out on strike if Teamsters go on strike. The Independent Pilots Association said they will not cross the picket line. So the pending strike of UPS workers, about 340,000 around the country, remains to be seen if that'll happen. But if it does, there will be no pilots crossing the picket line. And the president of the Teamsters has asked Joe Biden, the president of the United States, to stay out of this one. You remember he got involved in the railroad strike. So we'll see what happens with that. Also, my union, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, is out on strike. And I did learn also from Payday that Universal Studios trimmed all the trees providing shade for the people on the picket line. It just turns out that those trees are not owned by Universal Studios. They're owned by the city of Los Angeles, and the comptroller is investigating Universal for trimming these trees. More on that. Here in Illinois, the Pre-Trial Fairness Act will overhaul how judges decide whether someone awaiting trial should be released from jail on bail or not. Advocates of the no bail plan have called bail a penalty for poverty. The state's elimination of cash bail was backed by the Illinois Supreme Court just this week. And it lays out new procedures for detaining someone. Prosecutors must file a request that a person be detained and make arguments on why the person should be held before trial, including whether they believe the person is a danger to the public or a flight risk. Defense attorneys will be given more time to prepare for the hearing and will have the ability to call witnesses. A person can be held in custody until that hearing. It will still be up to the judge to determine whether someone is held in custody or released under certain conditions, like electronic monitoring. This is a victory, and it's good. On the sports front, starting this week is the Women's World Cup in soccer, or football, as it's known in most places in the world, taking place in Australia and New Zealand. And there's going to be a lot of soccer going on till about the 20th of August. So we're all going to get to watch it and become better and better soccer fans. Sort of a sport. There's a guy sailing across the ocean with his dog, and it turned out he got lost, and he was found by some Mexican fishermen. after 3 months at sea. This was on the news, and it was great to see this guy with a very long beard and pretty scraggly looking, having been rescued. In memoriam, longtime listeners or viewers to the show that know that Steve Wolf was often on the scene with his camera, taking pictures. He's been a friend of our show for a long time, and Steve did pass. Last week, we had the historian Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz on, and we talked about immigration. We talked about the Second Amendment, about colonial settlers. It was a long interview, and you can get that on youtube.com/Heartland Media. Also, we had Adam James on talking about the Northwestern football situation with the coach being fired. And Adam, who happens to be my cousin, is not only an actor, producer, martial artist, but happens to have played football at Northwestern under Dennis Green. I think that will be it. And we're going to take a musical break, and we're going to play music throughout the show from Grainne Dufffy, the blues woman from Ireland. We will be right back with our first guest. We're back with more Live from the Heartland for the week of July 22nd. And it really, it's a pleasure to bring on this first guest for today's show, and that would be Grainne Dufffy. And yes, she is en route to New Orleans from Ireland. And I think right now, I think you're in Washington, D.C., right?
I am, indeed, yes.
Well, we're looking forward to you coming to Chicago, and I think that's going to be next Thursday, the 27th, I think.
27th, correct.
At Martyrs on Lincoln Avenue.
That's right.
And we're gonna come over and see you. So let's find out a little bit about yourself. You're known as a blues woman. You do a lot of good music. I've been listening to it. Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, I suppose I am. That's correct. I would probably say I am a blues artist. I started off playing in a band with my sisters, which there was three of us, three girls in the band. We were like a rocked up version of the Corrs. We were doing like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. But from that, I started playing more guitar. And when I heard Peter Green playing on Need Your Love So Bad, there was just no turning back. I fell in love with the blues, started playing more electric guitar, and then went on to record my first album, which was a blues, I suppose, blues roots album.
Where did you grow up in Ireland?
I grew up in a county called Monaghan, which is right on the border. So I'm like quite close to Northern Ireland. I live about an hour from Dublin and an hour from Belfast.
Well, I understand that when you were growing up, you didn't have a TV. So
that's right.
Tell us what you guys did. You had you and your sisters. What were you doing every day when you weren't watching Howdy Doody and various kids' TV shows?
Well, there was 7 of us in our family, children. So we were either working because my parents had a business, so we would have to go and have them in the shop and in the garage. But mainly what we were doing was we had a record player. So we were allowed to get a record for Christmas or on our birthdays. So that was really where I developed the love of listening to music, was because when you'd no alternative, and we were big Bangles fans and Madonna fans. So I remember dancing around to Papa Don't Preach and, Walk Like an Egyptian and all that sort of stuff.
Aha. What kind of business did your folks have?
They were car sales.
Car sales?
Yeah. What
kind of car did you guys drive?
Everything. Every time we had a car, it got sold, and then we had a new car. So we never had a car for long. But they were like a faith dealership.
Well, Grainne, when did you first pick up an instrument, and what was it?
It was guitar. It was guitar, and it was really first of all, I started playing acoustic guitar, and I was playing a lot of Tracy Chapman and that kind of stuff. And then I realized when I heard Peter Green playing Need Your Love So Bad, I wanted to investigate the guitar more. So I started playing more lead and learning scales, and that was really and I started learning like riffs, like Led Zeppelin riffs and things like that. I was probably around 16. Actually, I was a late starter.
Well, it's great that it's great to have an instrument to play. I started off on I think they had a little what do they call these things? It was like a little plastic flute, and then
a recorder.
Yeah, a recorder, and then I had a trumpet because Harry James was my last name is James, so that's why I picked the trumpet, and later the guitar, and mostly my kids do the playing. I like to sing. Um, Tell us about your band. You've had a few bands, and
Yeah.
I know you've changed drummers, et cetera, et cetera. I've been watching these videos of you. You fill us in on the progression of bands that you've been involved with.
Well, I've been very lucky. The first growing up in County Monaghan, it was a real heritage of show bands, which I don't know if you know what they are, but they're basically the country music circuit in Ireland was quite strong when I was younger. And there was Aid Castlebrenny, the town I'm from, was the home of that. So there was a musician in everybody's family, which was brilliant because it meant that there was lots of musicians, even though we were quite a rural, small town. Everybody had like a brother, a guitar player, a sister who sang, an aunt who was like, a drummer or something. So, but really, County Monaghan, there was a great bass player where I'm from, Ronnie O'Flynn, and he actually played bass and drums on my first album. And he was really a bass player for me for the first about, I'd say, 7 years. And then we used a couple of different drummers. We've been very lucky. We've had Eamon First in the band for a long time. He's now plays with the Waterboys. And we had Darren Beckett in the band, and he has gone on to play with lots of great artists, with like Madeleine Carew and lots of other people. And then we also had a guy, Jerry Morgan, play with us for a long time, was with James Bay. He kind of was with us, and then he went on to play with James Bay. So it's like anything else. You have players who will be in the fold for a while, and then they will, play. And then Davy Watson was a very long time standing bass player who played with us. He actually had a band for a long time called the Bogey Boys. And they were like a sport band in Lizzie in America. So he was a rocker that we drafted in for a long time. But now for this record, we've had a really lucky, we're very fortunate. We got playing with Gary Clark Jr.'s rhythm section, which is Elijah Ford and JJ Johnson, who's also played with John Mayer and countless other people. And then we also had Mark Ford from the Black Crowes come in and guest on guitar and production.
Well, you mentioned this record, and I noticed that you have a lot of records out. Why don't you tell us about some of the records you have and the new one that you're out about now, pushing it?
Yeah, well, basically, I have about 5 studio records. From my first record was Out of the Dark, kind of a blues roots album. Second album was Test of Time, a wee bit more rock, kind of Stonesy influenced. Where I Belong, which we recorded in America with a lovely producer, Justin Stanley, who's married to Nick Costa. And that was more of a roots kind of an album, country roots album. Then I had a live album, which was recorded in Germany. And then we have this record. We had, Voodoo Blues, which came out during lockdown, recorded with Amy Winehouse's band, two players that played with her, which are Dale Davis and Troy Miller, Troy Miller is a really well-known producer in England, works with people like Gregory Porter and lots of other people besides Diana Ross. And he came on board for it, and it was great. And we recorded during lockdown. And then this record, which is the most recent record, Dirt Woman Blues, and we were production duties was shared between Mark Ford and Chris Goldsmith, who has worked with Ben Harper and Blind Boys of Alabama, and he's won a Grammy Award for that work. So it was really good to get working with Chris.
Oh, that's nice. The Blind Boys of Alabama. How much gospel music do you listen to growing up in Ireland?
Well, actually, I was a big fan of choir music because although we've more in our church, I sang in the local choir. It was the first place I sang was in my local choir. But we weren't doing gospel. We were doing more like just religious songs. But I developed a love, and I remember listening to lots of Aretha. But then I've also recently got really into Rosella Tharpe and listening to that kind of, I know she would have been more like some early history in gospel music.
There's a gospel show that follows our show on Saturday mornings on Loyola's WLUW, which is all old gospel music.
Wow.
It's really pretty neat.
Okay.
Anyhow, you also had mentioned country and Western music, and I know that even when I was in Ireland, 2 times I was over there, and but I did sense that there was an enthusiasm for C&W, and I'm just wondering who your favorite country artist might be.
Actually, my favorite, which sometimes is a debatable one, my favorite country singer in the female area was actually Linda Ronstadt. I absolutely love Linda's vocals. I mean, they were very clear and very perfect and very, refined in comparison to what I do. But I really appreciated her style and her sense of delivery in her music. But actually, I love people like Willie Nelson, And in terms of other people, I love whenever Bob Dylan does a bit of country, like Lily Lay. And to be honest, like my father was a huge country fan, so he loved people like Waylon Jennings and he loved Johnny Cash. So that was really a big influence whenever we were growing up listening to that sort of music as well.
I like all of them. I got to say, my favorite would be George Jones still.
Ah, yeah, George Jones and Tammy Wynette. Like those, all of that era is brilliant and the songwriting is excellent. And I'm lucky because my husband, his mother is a singer called Gloria, and she had a hit in Ireland, number one hit, the longest number one hit in Ireland with the song One Day at a Time. But she would have played us an awful lot of the original, like George Jones stuff and Tammy. And she really educated me on country, good American country music too.
Grainne, I think you mentioned that you did one of your recordings was done in the States.
That's right. Well, this is the second album I've done in the States. The first one I did was the album Where I Belong, and we did it in LA. And then this one here, Dirt Woman Blues, which we just released, was recorded in San Diego.
Dirt Woman Blues is the new one.
It's a new one.
In San Diego, but this is the first time you've come to the States to actually perform, right?
That's correct. This would be our first time performing here.
And
we performed in Canada, played Tremblant, Mont Tremblant in Canada. That was a big festival, lovely festival that they had us up there before.
So you're right now heading to New Orleans.
Yes.
And where are you going to play down there?
We are playing in a cool club called the Chikiwawa, which is quite a well-respected music club.
How do you say
the Chikiwawa. We actually were booked to play during the Heritage Festival. And unfortunately, that gig fell through because our artist visas came late. So we had to reschedule it to the lovely warm month of July in New Orleans.
that Blues and Heritage Festival is actually wonderful. I was down there in, I don't know, the late 70s. And it was one of the funnest times. I've had a lot of fun times in New Orleans. It's a great city. And then you're coming up here to Chicago, right? And where are you going to play while you're here?
We're playing Martha's. And we're also playing the Irish Heritage Centre. We're doing both. We're doing Martha's on next Thursday. And we're really looking forward to that. And then on Friday, we're doing the Irish Heritage Centre, which is a duo gig. It's not a full band gig. And we're actually playing the midday news channel. We're doing a slot on the day before on, what is your news channel called? Is it WNC? What's your main news channel? I don't
know. We got a lot of them. There's a different...
In Chicago. Okay. So we're doing the midday show for that.
And do you have the whole band with you?
No, we're actually playing with a band down here in New Orleans, and then we're also playing with a different band up in Chicago-based drum and bass player.
Do you know who you got playing with you in Chicago?
It's the two guys. You know what? You've got me there. I'm gonna have to check.
I wasn't trying to get you.
I do know that they're very well respected musicians, but they were kind of sourced for me, so we've yet to meet them.
I'm sure it'll be fun, and it'll be a good event. So yes. Martyrs is on Lincoln Avenue, and that's next Thursday. So people will have had a chance to hear this interview, and hopefully they'll be all breaking down the doors over there at Martyrs. I'd like to ask you a little bit about growing up again. Who were some of your favorite musicians? I mean, you've mentioned some of them, but I know that on those records you would get for Christmas, you had to have different people. So who were some of those albums that you were listening to?
Well, I actually remember my sister, she was going out with a drummer, and he was always bringing home stuff, like bringing stuff. They used to just have like music dates where he'd come over with all of his collection and she'd have her collection, and they'd make the old mixtape for each other. So I remember just sneaking into her room when she wasn't there and stealing whatever albums he'd brought over. So that really was my introduction to Led Zeppelin, and really the Pretenders were a huge band for me. I love Chrissie Hynde. I love her style of delivery and her songwriting. Then I also am really influenced by Fleetwood Mac, early Fleetwood Mac and late, because the two girls love Stevie Nicks and Kirsty McVie, and they were really a big influence on me. The style of songwriting in the later Fleetwood Mac as well. And like, yeah, of course, being Irish, I'm influenced by Thin Lizzy, Van Morrison, um, and Sinead O'Connor. I love all those artists as well, but primarily like singers. But a huge, huge artist for me is Bob Dylan. I absolutely adore Bob Dylan. Love the way he writes, crafts his songs, crafts his lyrics, and I actually love his delivery. People argue with me all the time that he's the worst singer in the world, and to me, he's probably one of the best singers in the world because you know what he's trying to say in his songs.
Grainne, when did you know that you wanted to be a musician? And how
Well,
do you like? Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I remember we were lucky with the Harvest Time Blues Festival in County Monaghan, which was a really great blues festival, bringing in bands from everywhere across the world. Peter Green played at it, and Van Morrison played at it, Gary Moore played at it. But I remember seeing a band called the Nemo Brothers, who I share the circuit with now in Europe. We're often on bills together. And I remember thinking, I want to be like those guys. They play all the time. And I remember after a gig thinking, I want to be a musician. I want to have my guitar in the hall, and I want to be going out to gigs. And that really was the moment I went, this is what I want to do.
Well, I understand that you also have a PhD.
Yes.
So maybe you could tell us about that and when you decided you didn't want to be like a scholar or a professor and you were going to front a band.
It was the other way around. I've actually just finished my PhD. So, yeah. So I kind of I was spending so much time traveling and being on the road. And like, sometimes you're waiting in airports and you're waiting just in hotel rooms and you're waiting and you might not have your guitar and you can't really get up and just start singing in the middle of the airport. So I wanted to put my time into something useful. So I said, what do I love? Love blues. And I did a study in women in the blues. And that kind of went from the Seventh Park up to Bonnie Raitt and just their place in history and looking at what they've brought in terms of their style of playing. And it was something that really informed me and helped me when I was writing the lyrics for Voodoo Blues and this record. So it was something that was both double-handed. It was something I wanted to do for myself, but it also ended up influencing me as a musician too.
Do you ever think about turning your PhD dissertation into a book?
I don't know. That's quite a challenge. For now, I'm happy to just take a break from all that. But maybe down the road somewhere.
What are your expectations for your career and what are your hopes?
Yeah, to be honest, I am just happy if I can still be able to play professionally. And of course, it's about like the kind of gigs I like doing. We've been really, really lucky. We got to play Glastonbury last year. Like to be able to mix it between doing nice club shows, some theatre shows, and festival shows that, like, you're in the right place, you're challenging yourself, you're moving forward with your music, and to be able to just live as a professional musician. I don't have huge aspirations in terms of, like I'm not expecting any massive things in terms of wanting to be a big name or anything like that. But obviously it's lovely to get recognition, but that's not what it's about. But in saying that, we got nominated for a Blues Blast Award this year in America, which is really surprising and was really, really nice. So fingers crossed we might, to be honest, it's a humble aspiration, but it's also, for me, is the biggest aspiration in life is just to continue being a professional musician and doing shows that of course are a credible standard and I'm pushing the music forward and not getting static and playing the same gigs all the time.
We just had on the show a fellow named Russ Bradford who he's into traditional Irish music. He's from Chicago, lives in New Mexico, teaches there, was into basketball, coached in Ireland, and he did a book called Paddy on the Hardwood about when he was learning the fiddle in Ireland from Paddy Jones, and he was also coaching basketball. And he's a political guy. And when I went to Ireland to visit him, and the other time I was there, I'm always interested in Irish politics. And I'm wondering if you care to talk a little bit about how things are going in Ireland. I mean, you probably grew up in the time of the Troubles. You're also around during Brexit. What's going on and what would you share with us?
This is really a hot topic for me because I live right on the border. So, I grew up with RUC police, like controls, where we border controls, where as a young girl, if we were traveling only 10 minutes down the road, we'd have to go through an REC checkpoint. We'd have to get out. Our car would be searched. It's something that was quite intimidating for us growing up. There was bomb scares. Even like only about 5 years ago, I was doing a gig in Belfast, and there was a pipe bomb in the venue, so we had to all leave the venue. Obviously, you're aware of all the marches and the unrest and things like that. But to be honest, I try to stay out of politics. In my band, I've had as many people from every background. Like I've had as many Protestants as Catholics in my playing circles. And the brilliant thing about music is that it unifies people. And obviously, I think at the moment we were actually in a lovely place there. I think in recent history that there was pretty much a nice, calm progression happening. Everything was very safe. You could go up into the Northern Ireland very peacefully. There was a nice trade agreement. We could go shopping up there and come across the border. There were no checks. But sadly, with Brexit, there's some tension starting to rise again. And for me, that's a negative thing because I don't see anything good coming out of that unrest. And, I'm sad to see it going backwards, not forwards,
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, well, give us a little bit of a promotional blast about your gig at Martyrs next week. Tell people to come and what they're going to see, who they're going to who's playing, etc. So you don't know who's playing with you, but tell us about
well, I know that they're a quality bass player and drummer. I know that much. And look, if you come down to see us, you're going to hear a mix of blues, rock, soul. It'll be full of energy. It'll be passionate music, and I think if you give it a chance, I hope you will enjoy it, and it'll be a good night.
Well, I looked you up online and I was listening to your music and I really liked it. And
Thank you.
I love Martyrs. It's a great club. We love Chicago. We love Ireland, and we're really glad you're here. New Orleans is lucky that they're going to have you first, but second performance in the States will be right here in Chicago.
Thank you, Michael. That's lovely. And you're very complimentary. So I'm looking forward to seeing you at the show. And, I'm expecting you front row now. You know all the lyrics and everything.
I'll be yelling away, and I won't be too political. I'll just
okay. Cool. I'm not, I try to wave the white flag. I'm not really a political person at all, as much as possible.
Well, I would argue with you that everything is influenced by politics. So it's important to stay tuned. But you're doing a great job, and you make a lot of people happy, and I'm glad I'm getting to know you.
Yes, me too. It's lovely to speak with you.
Right on. So I'm going to tell all you other people to stay tuned. We'll be back with more Live from the Heartland. We're back with more Live from the Heartland. It's for the week of July 22nd, and I'm Michael James, and I'm bringing on someone who is no stranger to the Live from the Heartland show. He's a longtime servant of the people, a people's lawyer from the People's Law Office, the one, the only Michael Deutsch. Michael, how are you doing over there in Evanston?
I'm good. Glad to be with you on your show.
Well, it's good to have you. I didn't know that you had retired from the People's Law Office. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you retired and fill in our newer and younger listeners as to what the People's Law Office does and what it has done?
Okay. I retired about a year ago. I just got fed up with dealing with the courts and trying to get justice from the courts, and decided that I was going to take a break from being a lawyer, at least, fighting in the courts. And the People's Law Office began in 1969. Founders were Dennis Cunningham, Jeff Haas, Don Stang, and Skip Andrew, and Susan Jordan came shortly thereafter. And basically, they began around the representation of Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers and Cha-Cha Jimenez and the Young Lords. And we're very active in representing youth and people charged with possession of marijuana and involved in protests. And I joined a year later in 1970. I was a law clerk for a judge in the United States Court of Appeals downtown. And when I was a law clerk, the Chicago conspiracy trial was going on. And I used to sneak down there and watch William Kunstler and Leonard Weinglass and Abby Hoffman and all the others. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a people's lawyer, and I want to get involved in representing people who are fighting for justice. So Susan Jordan, who I went to law school with, said, you ought to join us. And after meeting with Dennis, who wowed me with his esoteric views of everything, I joined the People's Law Office and stayed there for the next 52 years.
That's good. Now, you mentioned Dennis Cunningham. So Dennis must have been my lawyer before you started the People's Law Office. Before
I think so. Yeah.
And you had mentioned to me once that when you were a law clerk, you were working for Otto Kerner. Now, that was before or after he was the governor?
No, it was after he was the governor. He got after the Kerner Commission report, which he says there are two societies, black and white. He was appointed to sit on the United States Court of Appeals. But he really had no experience as a lawyer. He had been a politician all his career. And so he really didn't have a lot of legal skills as a judge. So oftentimes I would wind up writing his opinion, and he would then look it over and basically put a comma here and a capital here. And then he would often pull out a map of Illinois and discuss some part of Illinois that reminded him of the case we were talking about. So, he was still tied up with being the governor of Illinois and not really a judge that should be sitting on the Court of Appeals.
But I met him when I was going to Lake Forest College. And then in 1964, I took a photograph of him in Peoria at the Heart of Illinois Fair. I'll get you a copy of that photo. Okay. So you got involved with the People's Law Office. You'd gone to Northwestern. You grew up in Chicago. You had gone to Senn High School, not too far from where you live now, not too far from where I am right now. You've come on our show before, and I think the last time you were on was talking about a Kurdish man who you were trying to prevent him from being sent back to Turkey by an immigration judge.
His name is Ibrahim Parlak, and he has a restaurant in Union Pier area in Michigan. And for 20 years, he's had this restaurant. People rave about it. He was here, and after 10 years, he said, I'm going to be a U.S. citizen. So he applied for citizenship, and immediately they said he was a terrorist. And that was because Turkey was saying that he was a member of the PKK and therefore was involved in terrorist acts. And therefore they refused him U.S. citizenship, and they began process to send him back to Turkey. And after a lot of struggle, there was a hearing before an immigration judge who found that it was likely if he was sent back to Turkey, he would be tortured. And under the Convention Against Torture, he could not be sent back to Turkey. And therefore, he was protected. But the government appealed the decision to the Board of Immigration Appeals, not a very progressive outfit. And they took 2.5 years to decide his case. And then they decided that they were going to send it back to the immigration judge for more hearings on what the situation was in Turkey for Kurdish people. And right now, it's all pending now before the immigration judge. So that's one of the cases that I'm continuing to consult on and advise, even though I retired from the People's Law Office.
Well, let's talk about, I know one of the things that people at the People's Law Office have been involved with for many years is people wrongfully sent to prison. And you've been involved with a prisoner named Ronnie Carrasquillo.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about him. He's been in jail for 46 years.
Yeah, Ronnie Carrasquillo was a baseball star at Orr High School. And he was 18 years old, and it was in Humboldt Park, and there was a changing neighborhood, and there was a lot of violence against Puerto Ricans who were moving into that neighborhood. And there was this white gang that was attacking young Puerto Rican men. And these men formed a gang called the Gang for Protection. And Ronnie was involved with helping that. And there was a fight on the street at 2 a.m. in the morning between this white gang, the Gaylords, and the Puerto Rican group called, I don't even remember their name, but they were a small gang. And he came out of a party having been kind of drunk. And as they walked down the stairs, a guy had a gun and it was jammed. And he said, my gun is jammed. He gave it to Ronnie. Ronnie said, I can unjam it. They went on the street. There was a melee in the middle of the street. He was 150 feet away. And there was these two groups fighting. And he thought, well, I'm going to shoot over the crowd and break up the fight. And he shot 4 shots, and 3 of them wound up above and beyond where they were fighting in the abandoned YMCA. And 1 bullet went into the crowd, no one understood how, and it hit an off-duty cop that had stopped his car to break up the fight too. And the shot killed him. It hit him in the head and killed him. And so he was on trial for murder. And this was in 1976, okay? And he had a lawyer that didn't really know what he was doing. And he was in front of Frank Wilson, who was a notorious judge at 26th Street. And the trial before Ronnie's was for a mafia hitman. And Frank Wilson acquitted him on a bench trial. And there was a whole big outcry about Frank Wilson was corrupt and how did he acquit this mafia hitman, and there was investigations. And here comes Ronnie Carrasquillo, 18 years old, with the next case. And a courtroom full of cops, and Frank Wilson wanted to rehabilitate his reputation, and he gave him 200 to 600 years. And so Ronnie's been in prison all this time. We've had all this effort to get him out. He's been a model prisoner. Over 46 years, he's had 5 disciplinary shots in his 46 years. He's been trained as a paralegal. He's very religious. He's been very active in organizing other prisoners to get away from the gangs and get an education. And we've been trying. I've been representing him for 22 years, and we still can't get him out of prison. The parole board won't let him out of prison, even though he's totally rehabilitated, because there's a cop involved. And so this was the case I was in court today on, trying to get the appellate court to release him from prison, because there's a part of the Illinois Constitution which is called the proportionate penalty clause, and you're supposed to be sentenced based on the seriousness of your crime and your ability to be rehabilitated. And this judge didn't even consider any of that. He just gave him the 200 to 600. And about 5 years later, Judge Wilson retired, and they were still investigating him, and they convened a grand jury, and he blew his brains out in Arizona rather than go testify in the grand jury. And it came out that he took a $10,000 bribe to acquit the mafia hitman, and then, of course, gave my guy 200 to 600 years. So we've been trying to get him out. We've been in court. The parole board is corrupt. They don't care. He's gotten 7 votes. He needs 8. He needs 8 votes. He's got 7 votes 3 years in a row. And the last year, they revamped the parole board, and all the progressive people were forced out. And this year, he got 1 vote after getting 7 votes 3 years in a row. So what we're saying is that the judge didn't properly sentence him. He violated the disproportionate punishment clause, and he should be let out.
Mike, let me pursue this a little bit with the Illinois Parole Board. Who's on that? Who makes it up? How are they appointed to that? And how did the progressives on the board, and there were obviously 6 more than the one that's on there now, how did they get on there, and how did they get kicked off?
Well, the Illinois legislature Republicans in Illinois legislature made a challenge that says that the prisoner review board was not fair, and they forced out all the progressive. They didn't reinstate all the progressive people on the board. 6 people were taken off the board, all the people that had voted for Ronnie in the past. And therefore, the parole board right now, and the ultimate decision to who goes on the parole board is by the governor, Pritzker. But Pritzker gave in to the Republicans in the state legislature and didn't fight them, pushing all these progressive people out of the board. And it just happened. It happened over the last year. And it shows because Ronnie was getting 7 votes, and now he gets 1 vote. And all the people that voted for him in the past are gone.
And your court appearance this week, today, actually, when we're recording, how did that go?
I think it went well, but you never know with these judges, Actually, Federico Lyle, do you remember her? Black woman, alderman, past alderman. Yeah. She's a judge now, and she was on the panel. She seemed pretty good, but you don't know about the other 2 judges, you don't know what they're thinking. And so we just got to wait and see. But, all my cases, and I've had a lot of injustice cases. This is one of the highest injustice I can't believe. The guy is totally rehabilitated. He's, 18 years old. He went in, he was a baseball star, and they won't give him up.
I was at a Democratic Party 49th Ward fundraiser recently, and all these people running for judge showed up, from all over the city. And I'm kind of amazed at how careerist some of these people seem. And, my first question to some of them who were looking to, they were introducing themselves. I said, were you involved in any progressive organizations when you were in high school? I didn't get any real good answers. But, I didn't know a lot about this Ronnie Castillo, and I will certainly be asking a few questions about it.
Yes, you should. Yeah, actually, we had a great turnout. The courtroom was filled with people of his supporters, All these people that have supported him over the years came, and literally the whole courtroom was filled with his supporters. Emma Lozano was there and some other people. She's been supporting him all these years. So, yeah, it's an important case because it shows how arbitrary the prisoner review board is. They call it the parole board.
I'm a little surprised that, I got to admit, I was never a fan of Pritzker, but as a governor, I've been pretty appreciative of a lot of stuff he's done.
Yeah, and, he's done some good stuff.
We have some time left. I would like to ask you about the International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what that's all about, Mike.
Okay. Some group of progressive lawyers, some from the National Lawyers Guild, some from the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, which is an international group of progressive lawyers, formed this idea to create a tribunal that would look into the effects of U.S. imperialism around the world, particularly as to sanctions and coercive economic measures that the U.S. is imposing against these countries across the world. And the way it was set up and the way it is set up is that they would have Zoom hearings at these different these different venues where these countries were, and experts from the country would testify at the hearings, and we would ask questions as jurors. And then ultimately there's going to be a report about all these different countries and how they're suffering under U.S. sanctions or other coercive measures. And there's going to be a report, and maybe there's going to be a book that comes out, and maybe some lawsuits about what's going on illegally under international law.
What are some of the countries that are being looked at?
Okay. Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, Iran, Iraq, Yeah, those are some Palestine.
So this is basically about it's about countries that have been affected by U.S. imperialism.
Exactly.
Actually, the title is the International People's Tribunal on U.S. Imperialism, Sanctions and Economic Coercive Measures.
Right.
And well, we know that. I saw today in a paper that the European Union, I believe, got a little heavier on Cuba. It's amazing to me that, well, certainly in the case of Cuba, and that they've been treated so roughly by everyone under the influence of the United States. Let me ask you, how did this International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, et cetera, come to be? I mean, who created it?
I think these activists from the Guild and the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, who have chapters all across the world, decided they were going to do these hearings and hopefully focus attention on these sanctions that have been imposed against all these different countries by the U.S. Some of them are totally illegal because they also sanction medical medicines, which are supposed to be excluded from any kind of sanctions. And in fact, Iran has all these medical problems, and they're not able to get medications for the medical problems because of the U.S. sanctions. So this was an effort to bring attention to sanctions around the world. And these progressive lawyers were involved in organizing it. And then they reached out to other people and got them involved. And there's lawyers from the NCBL and lawyers from Haiti and lawyers from France that are all involved in this activity.
How much time does it take, Mike, and how often do you watch some of these hearings?
Well, it started in the end of May, and we've been doing them like once or twice a month, maybe 3 times a month, and they're usually run for 2 to 3 hours. And you don't have to, if you're one of the jurors, you don't have to be on each one. There are different jurors, and different ones sign up to be on the different tribunals.
The International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, sanctions, and economic coercive measures, has it gotten any press?
It's got some press, particularly international press, and some press. But what we're trying to do is when the actual results come out, the determinations by the jurors as to what these violations are, they're going to be a report on each country. And I think then we'll focus more on the press. And like I said, we're thinking about maybe bringing some lawsuits against the U.S. for some of these sanctions, which violate international law.
Mike, in our closing minutes of this segment of Live from the Heartland for the week of July 22nd, I'd like to ask you, as a longtime progressive lawyer, a very good citizen, your recommendations to younger people or people who have yet to be involved or just becoming involved on things that they should do or think about or be aware of. How to be a good citizen, good organizer, a good progressive member of the community.
Well, first thing I would say is do not get discouraged. Do not get the things look kind of bleak, and there's a lot of uncertainty about the progressive movement and what the U.S. is doing all over the world. But keep fighting. That's the most important thing, and work with your people that you know and are involved, and keep organizing them to speak out and branch out and organize as many people as you can. This is hard times, but we shouldn't give up.
Yeah, well, you got any, is there any signs of optimism out there for you?
Well, I see a lot of young people that are kind of committed to social justice. I do. But of course, we're going to need everybody on board. So I'm hoping that, we'll be able to organize more people over time and get people involved.
How do you like your new mayor up there in Evanston and the new mayor in Chicago?
Well, I like the new mayor in Chicago, and I'm hoping he'll be successful, but he's got a very difficult job, and a lot of people are waiting for him to fail. The new mayor in Evanston hasn't really shown me anything really progressive. I know he's supposed to be progressive, but I haven't really seen anything coming from the office of the mayor in Evanston.
And let me ask you as we close out, what is your workout regimen? I see you on the weight machines at the McGaw YMCA. I see you on the bicycle, the treadmill. How long you been working out?
Oh, I've been working out for the last few years. The Evanston Y is a great place. You use it as well, and it's really close to my house. And I do 20 minutes on the bike, 10 minutes on the treadmill, 10 minutes on the elliptical, and then I do the machines. And so that's about an hour workout. Every morning I do that.
I attest to you do it. I watch you. I go in the pool first thing every morning.
Yeah, I know.
Certain days I come up and do my weights.
Right. It's great to see you up there.
Michael Deutsch, you're a wonderful guy. You've been doing a lot of good for the people, and you're still doing it. I hope things come through on the Ronnie Carrasquillo case, on the Abraham Parlak case, and I certainly hope that the International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, sanctions, and economic coercive measures really turns in some good reports that get some real attention.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'll see you at the Y.
Okay, good. Take care.
And everybody else, we want to thank you for tuning in to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 22nd. I want to thank our guests, and I want to thank Hal James for making the show possible with his engineering. I want to thank Katie Hogan and Tom Clark and Lynn Orman, who also contribute greatly to this show. And we encourage you all to do good in the world, because the world needs all that you do. And next week, we'll be back with more interesting guests, including the blues man, Charlie Musselwhite. So all power to the people. Have a great week.